Okay, so good afternoon to everyone. Buenas tardes a todos. As it is already usual in our webinars, we have people from all over the world. So welcome from Latin America, from Asia, from Europe, from Africa. Gracias a todos. Como siempre tenemos gente de todas partes del mundo, de Latinoamérica, de Europa, de África, de Asia. Gracias por estar con nosotros esta tarde. Today's topic is how to encourage academic research in the fields of innovation and legal tech. This is a topic that comes from our worry when we hear a lot of people talking and discussing things related to innovation in the legal field, legal technology, digital transformation. We believe that there is a big marketing bubble at the moment in the market, and there are a lot of imprecisions and a lot of, like, I don't want to say this word, but maybe it's incorrect, but I would say in English, bullshit is what I think that I hear sometimes. A lot of people talking about things without really, like, let's say, using scientific methodologies. So they talk about how artificial intelligence is going to replace lawyers, and they don't even explain why, no data behind it, etc. So that's why I think that research is really key for these, let's say, disciplines or discipline to develop in the right way. Because I think if we don't stop this very fast, I think that this might end up being like something in which nobody believes anymore, or a few people believe, but others not, and then who is right? I don't know if the ones who believe in it or the other ones. The thing is that, in my opinion, all these fields are key to the future of the sector and to the future of justice. And if we don't really understand and we agree on terms and on things, I think that this can end up being not exactly what it could be, which is the opportunity of our sector to develop in the right way according to how other sectors are developing, and the opportunity of justice to become really fair, accessible, and good. So this is why. And about ILSA, as you all know, we are our initiative. We have already around 20 members in Latin America, Europe, Africa, and Asia. And we are working together in activities that help each other to understand better what is going on and doing things together, like this hackathon Argiro is going to tell us about. This is what we do, but I don't want to enter into detail. Just say that if I have to say what is, let's say, characterizing our work, there is a lot of collaboration, a lot of creativity. Of course, we always work in things related to innovation, digital transformation, and legal technology. And our dream is to help these universities that are working with us to be #1 in these fields, and of course to help their students achieve, let's say, the kind of education that they need to be employable in the future. We work with a lot of people, so we are surrounded by innovative trainers, and we want to lobby and change the way education in law is today. Here is a bit repetitive, so I go already and explain you again how we will do this. So we have the two panelists today, so 30 minutes for the panelists, a little bit more if necessary, so not so much formality. We have 3 questions. Of course, if any of the panelists wants to add any other questions because he or she considers that that's relevant, no problem. And finally, the room will be for you, the audience, and in an open and free way, please make your remarks. These are our 3 questions of today. So the first one is, what are your universities? So Tilburg and Open University. Tilburg is a Dutch university, and Open University is a UK university. And what are they doing in the fields of innovation, legal technology, and the future of law? So tell us about your present experiences. Then second, in what fields do you think that we need more research? And then finally, if you can share some relevant experiences on academic research, it will be fantastic. So I would like the speakers to introduce themselves, please. I leave you the room right now. And before that, excuse me, before introducing you, I have Argiro. So I'm going to stop sharing. And Argiro, if you have your 5 minutes of glory to explain us about the hackathon.
Thank you very much, Maria. Thank you for giving me the floor. I won't take more than 3 minutes because I'm looking forward to listening to today's speakers. I would just like to bring to everyone's attention the legal hackathon that we are co-hosting with Ilsa and Maria in about a month from now. And just to give you a little bit of information, and then I will also share the link in the chat where you can find all details. So a few things about me. I'm a senior lecturer in law, and I'm also the director of Let's Lab, which stands for Law, Emerging Tech and Science. And this is an interdisciplinary hub at the University of Greenwich in London, United Kingdom. And we are currently working on an interdisciplinary project with the School of Computing on legal tech. And one of the things that we thought would be excellent to organize is a legal hackathon on the topic of promoting human rights in smart data-driven cities. Now, why is this important? By 2050, it is estimated that 2/3 of the world's population will live in urban areas. And the city has always been at the center of human rights implementation. Ever since the Greek Agora or the Roman Forum, the urban environments have always been determining one's daily activities and also their identities, be it private or public. Now, fast forward to today, today's smart cities, they often employ technologies, perhaps for the public interest, and they are very much data-driven. Take, for example, real-time crime mapping or driverless transport. But at the same time, they're really lagging behind. I must say they are underexplored as to the potential they hold for promoting human rights. So that's the challenge that we are setting for this hackathon. And the aim is really to spark innovative ideas and to design smart urban environments that are promoting digital democracy, and they're promoting human rights and in data-driven governance. We are pleased to say that so far we have actually received the support of the Spanish Bar Association, the Open Data Institute, the Society for Law and Computers, and we've also partnered up with some other universities as well, and a number of media partners such as Foro Jurídico, the Latin Council, El Jurista, and the list is endless. So if you have any interest in this, we're actively now looking for sponsors or supporters, media partners. And if you feel that you would have any students or members of staff, because this hackathon is actually open to students, but also young professionals, that they would be interested in participating, then please do spread the word. I will leave the link in the chat function now. And Maria, thank you once again very much for this short promo time. Thank you, appreciate it.
Fantastic. Okay, so the link will be shared. If you want to participate, there is the possibility of doing it individually or in teams. If you do it individually, we will try to assign you with the best team possible. And this is on a weekend, but it will be fun. We are going to use a very, very interesting virtual platform, really last generation. So I think everything will be interesting in the experiment that we're having in July. And now let's start with our webinar. So Francine, Maurice, may I ask you please to introduce yourself? I don't know if you want to be woman first or man first. I don't mind. You decide. The room is yours.
There you go, Francine.
Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you, Maria. It's really lovely to be here and to speak to you. My name is Francine Ryan. I'm a senior lecturer at the Open University. For those of you that don't really know very much about the Open University, just to say that we're perhaps quite different from other universities. We are effectively a virtual distance university. We are the largest we have the largest law programme in the UK. We have about 6,000 students who study with us. We're an open access university, so we don't require any educational qualifications from our students. And most of our students study part-time at a distance, and they are geographically dispersed across the UK and sometimes internationally. So we're probably quite different to your traditional kind of universities. And so I'm a senior lecturer in the law school. I'm also part of what's called our Open Justice Project. So I'm a co-director of that. And predominantly, we offer practical pro bono legal activities to our law students. And that's kind of where my interest in legal tech comes from. And as well as the sort of legal tech projects that I'm going to talk a little bit about today and our research in relation to that, I also run our virtual law clinic as well. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. That's really impressive. Nice to meet. And I'm Maurice Barnett. I live in The Hague, which is sometimes known as the City of Peace and Justice. We are in this atmosphere of these international courts. I don't know whether you saw Mladic being again, a verdict, a lifelong verdict for Mladic yesterday, coming from The Hague. I'm professor at Tilburg University right now. My title is Professor of Innovation of Legal Systems, and that I have that title is probably linked to my role at HIL, the Hague Institute for Innovation of Law, and there I'm research and development director. I will share a link where you can see more about my work. At Tilburg University, we have a tradition of doing interdisciplinary research. If you look at SSRN, Social Science Research Network, you will see that Tilburg University ranks rather high in European universities, even in the world, for that type of research. We have a long time a department working on legal technology, and at the same time, I went from university to HIL to be more to do research that has more impact. So maybe I will come back to that later when we talk about what each university does.
Fantastic. So if you agree with me, let's start with the questions. The first one is, what are your universities? Are your universities promoting already the research in these fields, innovation, legal technology, and the future of law? Are they? So, Francine.
So I'm going to come from this. I think this hopefully is going to work quite well in the sense that I come very much from a kind of teaching background and a kind of and how that links to research. And so we do kind of research that links to our teaching, and very much our research informs our teaching. So I'm going to really sort of talk about it from a very practical point of view. So I'm hoping that will be of interest to people on this webinar today. So we have two university kind of research groups in our law school, and even though we've got a lot of law students, we're relatively small law school in comparison to other organisations. So we have a more kind of theoretical kind of research cluster, which we call LIFT, which stands for Law, Information, Future and Technology. And that's very much looking at shifts and trends and tensions in sort of techno-legal domains. And that's a very kind of a critical approach to looking at technology, looking at smart contracts, Bitcoin, etc., blockchain, etc. And then we have the kind of more practical stuff, which I'm involved in, which is the sort of the law and technology in education. So we have a Futures of Legal Education and Practice group. And that's the kind of research that I'm interested in, because I'm really interested in the intersection between law and technology and how that's integrated into legal education. So how do we prepare students for this changing market? How there's these new ways of practicing law, and what responsibilities do law schools have, and how do we prepare our legal curriculum to address some of these challenges that are being faced? So that's kind of my perspective, which might be slightly different to other perspectives that we're going to talk about today. But I think there's some, really interesting questions around how we make impactful interventions into law school curriculum. And I think there's a lot of kind of hype around legal tech and what law curriculum should be doing in relation to legal tech. So I think we need to be asking some really interesting questions about what we're teaching law students about technology and innovation. How do we develop and encourage technical literacy? How do we get students to really think about some of these complex legal and ethical issues that are now being presented to us in terms of this radical technology change that we're facing now? So from our perspective, the way that we've looked at it is very much from a kind of practical application of legal tech. So what I do, and my research is linked to my teaching, so I run a legal tech project with our students. And so we use legal design methodologies, human-centered design principles, and we ask our students to build legal tech solutions. And we run a project called Digital Justice, and we use a software platform run by an Australian company called Joseph, which is got a chatbot interface to it. So Joseph worked with a number of universities in Australia and quite a number of law firms. And we basically get our students to build chatbots to provide legal information, automated document drafting on areas of legal information. And really through that kind of process, we're really asking our students to apply their legal knowledge, to use design principles, to look at user-centered design, and really think about the kind of access to justice issues, the democratization of legal information. And really our work in sort of the Open University, and particularly probably within the UK, has been very much inspired from the work that's going on in the US. So colleagues like Margaret Hagan at Stanford University, Northeastern University, who've been doing lots of work in this space already, and I think really have inspired what's happening in the UK in terms of legal tech and how that's developing within law curriculums. And so that kind of practical application of legal tech has kind of led me to do some research. So I've been doing some research in looking at what universities in the UK are doing in terms of legal tech, what kind of skill sets we need to be developing within our curriculum. And also we've done a practical project, so an empirical piece of research where we worked on a project with students, and we co-designed it with a number of organisations who provide public legal information, and we co-designed a mobile app, and we did some research into looking at kind of what students, the sort of skills that students developed, on what kind of civic society needed in terms of delivering these kind of legal tech apps. Because I think Maria, you made a little bit of point. There's a lot of hype around this. A lot of kind of legal tech is being sort of, I suppose, being pioneered as a kind of answer to access to justice crisis, and it's going to solve all our problems. And although I am sure that technology certainly has a role to play, I think that we have to be very much questioning and thinking about what the role of technology is, how appropriate it is, and also what we need to be teaching our law students. So, I think you talked about your earlier webinar about coding. Do we need to be teaching law students to code, or do we just need to give them an understanding of technology and how technology works? So that's kind of the field of research that I'm in, and then the more theoretical research that some of my colleagues are involved in. And I just thought I'd just mention also more broadly within the UK. So, for example, colleagues on this webinar might be aware that Oxford University have a law tech project called Project AI for English Law, which has got 6 work packages, which is looking at understanding new business models in legal services, mapping digital justice, looking at the frontiers of AI in legal reasoning, coordinating skill investment in tech transfer, looking very specifically at law and technology education, and then mapping what's happening within the law tech innovation ecosystem, particularly within the UK. And so I'm part of a network that Oxford has set up where academics in the UK have been talking about sort of these issues to do with law and technology. And certainly, I would say in the past couple of years, there's definitely been a lot more interest within academia within the UK in terms of looking at legal tech and looking at how it can be incorporated into law school curriculums. And there's certainly a growing interest in that. And maybe later on, I could talk a little bit more about how that is manifesting itself. But really, I suppose from an open university point of view, ours is about the sort of the practical, how we can teach what we're teaching and how we can develop our pedagogy and how we can research that pedagogy to really understand better about what graduates will need in this emerging and changing legal market. So I shall stop there and pass on.
You can go on, but maybe it's good to hear Maurice, and then we jump into the second question. It was very interesting. Thank you, Francine.
Yeah, let me add a few perspectives from Tilburg University and also from the Netherlands, and maybe a few perspectives from Hill towards research on this at universities in general in the world. We have a long time already in Tilburg. We have a research group on law and technology. And they really became very successful in the past 2 decades. What they basically did is looking at innovations in different spaces, looking at privacy, and basically their perspective has been to investigate whether as certain new things should have implications for legal thinking. So more the type of legal philosophy work. Do algorithms change your view about what law is and what law can do, and the law as code perspective, perhaps. The other strand of important work, that also already was mentioned by Francine, is really being involved in innovation yourself, and that's what you do when you do legal design, when you do user-centered design thinking, applying that to the tools that people use to resolve disputes or to prevent crime, or whatever role the law is playing in people's lives. I found that in the setting of law schools, the tendency always has been to stick to the legal point of view. So I've been involved in quite some innovation programs where in the end people were more inclined to ask questions like, is this allowed, should it be allowed, what are the risks, than actively trying to build things themselves. Let me take an example. I worked on for a long time on a online dispute resolution program for divorce, called Rechtwijzer. It has received some notoriety, and the basic idea here is that we figured out in all kinds of focus groups what type of information are people looking for when they are at this crisis moment in their lives. What do they need agreements on? How can we invite them to participate in an agreement, a divorce agreement process? What incentives are needed to bring them to the platform? How should it be paid? How should it be facilitated by mediators? Should it have adjudication facilities? So we were very much in the in innovation ourselves and figuring out how to better resolve family disputes. One of the most important and classical disputes people can run into, because a family breaking up is some of the highest risks you can have in your life. We found out that most universities reacted to this from the perspective, okay, is this allowed? Is this replacing judiciary? Is this, if you put in a lawyer in a more neutral role, which we did, is that allowed from a lawyer regulation perspective? And we had hoped for much more support from research on, does this really solve family justice problems? Is this preventing domestic violence because there's less stress when people separate? So that's a bit where I see the dilemma for law schools in this field. Are you going to be really involved in innovation yourself and innovating the legal processes and the legal system? Or are you doing what lawyers mostly do, looking at what other people do and pinpointing the risks and finding out how it works in the legal system if certain conflicts would go to the Supreme Court?
Okay, very interesting view. Let's jump into the second question. In what fields related to innovation and legal tech do you think that we need more research? And this time, Maurice, if you want, you can start answering, and then Francine, you're second.
Yeah, my perspective is very much formed by my work at Hill, where somehow over the past years we really got involved in the access to justice problem, and we're becoming part of a movement that you could call now people-centered justice. And this movement is building on years and years of empirical research and legal needs studies on what do people need when they access justice, procedural justice research, enormous amount of work done by psychologists and sociologists in sociology of law projects, and it has become a political issue by a few things happening. First, access to justice becoming a sustainable development goal. It's now Sustainable Development Goal number 16. And as you may know, all sustainable development goals are driven by indicators, by improving systematically, by evidence-based working on adjudication or eradicating diseases. So not to speak of climate change. And we found that for access to justice and for rule of law more in general, the kind of measuring, monitoring framework is missing. And you may have heard about the World Justice Project, which was a pioneer in making rule of law a thing that could be measured. And increasingly, major donors in international development, organizations like the OECD, UN agencies, USAID are now coming to a people-centered justice approach where, yeah, they kind of say it's not sufficient to look at institutions, to legal systems where they work, but you have to take the people perspective. And you have to work evidence-based in what you offer as legal system to people. Yeah, it has to be more an international community. Let me make this a little bit more specific by singling out one justice problem that is known everywhere in the world: domestic violence. There's a lot of signals that Corona added to the number of domestic violence cases. If a woman with a domestic violence issue goes somewhere, she goes to the police, she goes to a social worker, she may go to her healthcare practitioner, she might go to a lawyer, she might go to a legal aid office. What treatment are we then offering in the world? Are we sure that what the police is then going to do, which might be a restorative justice-like intervention or taking down the evidence and looking at whether the perpetrator can be put in jail or not? Are we sure that these are the interventions that women then get, that women need, that are fitting their lives, their assessment of the situation? What we see is that what women get in that type of situation is very different depending on which lawyer they go to, which policeman or woman they enter into. There might be places in the world where very sophisticated, specialized services have been developed, but it's very uncertain whether people go there. And believe me, there's a lot of research on what works for domestic violence, but it's very hard to make sense of it. And that's not because it's bad research, but it's because we don't know or what the criteria are against which domestic violence interventions should be evaluated. We missed the international knowledge infrastructure that is there, for instance, in healthcare or in psychiatry, where there is a uniform system of diagnosing schizophrenia or depression, and interventions on depression can be tested in the US, and you can look at the data, and you can then test it again on a smaller scale in Holland, and you can try to apply the best treatments in that way. So my appeal to a consortium of research universities, is to think about really becoming involved in evidence-based interventions, and really ensuring that we build a common knowledge infrastructure. And there's an enormous need of research. I spoke about one problem, but more generally, everybody in the world is saying these judgments do not work so well. They take a long time. So maybe we do ADR, or problem solving, or restorative justice interventions. And we need a lot of research on that. What is it, mediation? What questions work? What settings work? What types of mediation work? There is research on it, but it's like this. Yeah. And mediation is probably the most talked about intervention in the legal system nowadays. but also interventions that are more classical legal interventions can be tested and can be improved, so that the impact of these interventions and how they make lives of people better can be tested. So there I am, evidence-based justice research.
Okay, super. Francine, your views on this?
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting. I think there are a number of things that I think that we need to be looking at. So I'll talk a little bit about in relation to law schools in a minute, but just to kind of pick up some of those points in relation to sort of evidence-based, I think what we've seen certainly through the pandemic is this the kind of the move to kind of a remote justice, remote courts. We've seen a kind of I suppose each different jurisdiction having different experiences of moving online. Certainly within the UK, there's been a lot of research about users and their experience of moving online. And I suppose this kind of I wonder sometimes, are we kind of sleepwalking into things without really kind of questioning and testing what actually works? And certainly I think that's the thing with technology, is that there's this kind of, I suppose, tension between our excitement and the potential of what technology can do, but also about whether we're asking the right questions and we're being critical enough about what its limitations are and what users needs. And certainly within the UK, I think we've learned quite a lot. I think in terms of we are definitely moving to kind of online courts. There's a big kind of transformation project that's happening within the UK in terms of moving to online courts and to remote courts. And clearly there is some significant benefits from that, but there are also huge challenges in terms of digital exclusion, digital poverty that I think have really been highlighted within the pandemic. And I think some of those issues around digital exclusion are things that we really need to be asking, serious questions about, in terms of ensuring that we do have access to justice and that technology doesn't serve to further exclude people who are already excluded for lots of other reasons. So I think there really is an opportunity for sort of greater collaboration. I think it seems that kind of lots of each jurisdiction is doing different things or looking in different areas, and I guess one of the hardest things is how we ensure that we can come together more to kind of share knowledge. And I certainly know that during the pandemic, Professor Suskan set up the remote courts to kind of try to kind of bring that kind of knowledge to be shared across different jurisdictions. And I think we need to be doing lots more work in terms of making sure that that kind of knowledge is shared, and that we are learning lessons from when a jurisdiction takes a particular approach. We learn lessons, and that's applied in the next iteration of a particular project within a jurisdiction. So I think, as I say, I think we live in really interesting times in terms of what technology can do to support access to justice. I think we need more research into digital exclusion and about how we use technology in a way that really supports access to justice. And then I would say, in terms of looking at it from kind of university kind of teaching perspectives, I think we need more research into what actually graduates are going to need for the future. So what kind of skills are we saying that if technology is going to transform the way that we deliver justice, and we're going to change the way in which law firms work, well, what does that then mean for law schools? What does that mean for law graduates or graduates more generally? And I think there's a kind of a tension within universities about whether or not who is best placed to do this work and how we can do this more interdisciplinary, and how we can develop these kind of partnerships between kind of lawyers who are, I hope you don't mind me saying, naturally conservative with a small c, who don't really like risk and taking risk, and other parts of universities where perhaps they are better placed to help law schools develop these kind of projects. So I think some research around how we do that more effectively, and actually what graduates need, what are the skills that legal education needs to be delivering, and then thinking about how we then evaluate those projects. So I think I said kind of originally that I think there's a kind of a real interest in legal tech within legal education, but I think we also need to be making sure that we are evaluating to make sure that actually what we're doing has relevance, has resonance, is actually developing the skills that we think it or we want our law students to deliver. Because I think that if we're not careful, there's a slightly kind of bandwagon thing that we can all get very overexcited about the hype of technology and not really question whether or not it's doing its job. So I think in terms of universities developing projects where there's going to be innovation projects, it's really about having research that looks at the pedagogy of that and evaluates to what extent that is successful and is useful going forward.
Very good, very interesting. So last question, can you share with us relevant experiences of your university in academic research in innovation and legal technology?
So do you want me to start that one?
Yes, please, Francine,
Yeah.
go on, and then Maurice can answer in the second place this time.
Yeah, so I can only refer to, so I've got colleagues who are researching and have got in relation to blockchain and data and smart contracts, and are doing a lot of research in those kind of areas. In terms of my particular interests, I'll just share a little bit about my interests and what we as a university in terms of our practical approach are taking. So obviously we're looking at our kind of research in terms of legal tech within the curriculum. And as part of that research, we've been really looking at how we look at the kind of gap in terms of navigating for students that law and technology gap. And so partly what I've been doing is working on a book with some colleagues in two other institutions within the UK, and then a colleague who runs a legal tech company in Hong Kong, to develop a book on digital lawyering and technology and legal practice. So we're really kind of looking at the impact of digital lawyering on professional identity and looking at the kind of emerging skills and competencies that employers are now requiring. So that's kind of the particular interest that I have in terms of my university. And as part of that, in terms of our innovation work, at the Open University, we're always looking at how we use technology to deliver our curriculum. And one of the things that I'm working on at the moment is a new project where we're developing a virtual courtroom, which we are looking to teach law through a virtual courtroom, which will be like a 3D representation of a court where students will take 3D human avatars and be able to interact with each other. And the thing that we're interested in as well is how we are going to use that to support access to justice. So we're going to be developing a research project around how we work with parts of civic society to look at how we support litigants who are representing themselves through the court process, and how we're going to develop those kind of practices in order to support access to justice. So in terms of our innovation work, we're really looking at how virtual reality can be used to develop kind of new innovative ways of teaching law, but also how we can support civic society as well. And so that's a kind of research project that we are currently working and developing at the moment. And then we're doing research in terms of empirical research in terms of testing our projects, in terms of our legal tech projects, to work out what this kind of skills and what that our students will need going forward. And as part of that, we are working on a project where we've been talking to law firms and to lawyers in practice to ask them about the kind of future skills, attributes and competencies they see that are required for future legal practice. So kind of really from a kind of very practical point of view to kind of inform on our teaching and our pedagogies around innovation and legal technology. So yeah, that's a little bit about where we're at the current time.
Thank you, Francine. So Maurice.
Yes, what I see happening in the world is, as I said, that this paradigm of people-centered justice is developing. So we see, really a great research group forming around the OECD, around a group called Task Force for Justice. We see them engaging with that paradigm. We also see that the research topic of how is the rule of law and how our access to justice doing is growing. And actually the results are worrying. If you read the news and you see the coups, you see the lockdown measures, the anti-democratic things, you will get a sense. But objectively in the world, since 4 or 5 years, the rule of law is going down. We are in a lucky circumstance in Holland that our research institute at the Ministry of Justice has done 4 legal needs surveys over 16 years. And the trends are really worrisome. People have more difficulties to solve their justice problems now than they had 16 years ago. They go less often with their problems to courts. They go less often to the police. They are more often trying to self-help. They are less going to lawyers. And there's surprising results coming out of that. It's not because lawyers are too expensive. It's basically about lawyers not delivering and courts not delivering what people need in these crises that they are into, whether it's a murder case or being indebted or a breakdown of a commercial partnership. So at the case that is now building that access to justice as we know it, as it's delivered through lawyers and courts, is not working, is becoming more strong. I was looking this morning at data we have collected together with the Institute for Advancements of American Legal System, ILS, in the United States, and these data are also worrisome. Coming to institutions that are supporting it, I would like to mention ILS. They combine university research. They are at the University of Denver in a very good way with very practical, policy-oriented research for the legal system. There's a few people in Canada now and at Harvard doing randomized controlled trials. So really seeing whether sending people with a certain problem to a lawyer or to a legal aid clinic, what is the impact of that intervention. So I would very much recommend looking at that. And I don't want to fight with anything Francine said, but the question whether a remote courts works and how we should think about it, and digital exclusion. I've worked on online dispute resolution systems for 5 years in the past, and these questions always came back, but nobody asked how many people were excluded from courtrooms. So and I always try to answer the question. There's 10% out there who are maybe digitally completely excluded right now, and how many people know how to deal with a lawyer or with a court? And yeah, so focusing on the people for whom it might not work, and focusing on the risks is also very much part of legal thinking. And I think as researchers, yeah, we also we should prioritize our research questions. Maybe I'm too Protestant or too what's that, utilitarian, But I feel it as my duty to let my research groups and my PhD students work on the topics that where you really have the highest probability you have impact. We look a lot to the research method of and the evidence-based working in the healthcare sector. There's a lot we can learn from there. There's tons of ethical questions there as well, and they need to be discussed, etc. But there's so much good to be done by figuring out which interventions work. And we lawyers make enormous interventions in people's lives. We may send them for prison for their entire life. We may be the person as a judge who in 10 minutes decides on the future of these children. Or on the future of this business. Let's do it responsibly, and we live in a confusing world, and there's many injustices, but let's focus on the biggest one first.
Okay, thank you so much to both of you. I'm going to try to summarize what I think came out from what you both said. Of course, there is going to be some ingredients that I add from my own experience and ideas. My feeling is that there is research at the moment on how technology is affecting law. So we have people researching AI and blockchain and privacy and etc. There is also research on the skills of the future, you know, what kind of lawyers we need to train. And indeed, you find lots of articles on these things and a lot of papers. But, and I fully agree with Maurice, I think that, you know, somehow maybe we are not sexy enough as a field, law and justice, for other kind of, let's say, research. I would love more sociologists, more technologists, more statistic experts, big data experts looking at the sector. My feeling is that there are not so many research on the economy of justice. By the way, Maurice, when I learned about your research on the finance for justice, I was like, wow, my God, you know, this is great. I know so very little work on, you know, how to finance justice, on who is financing justice. I also know very little work, and by the way, I love your pyramid on the conflict, which I discovered 5-6 years ago, and I use it constantly to teach. It was the first time in my life that I thought that a conflict, you know, is in society, and it's like this Maslow pyramid, and the theory of the conflict, you know, and I fully agree with you. When I first hear about alternative dispute resolution, I didn't know what it was, but now, still, I really don't know what is alternative. What are the alternative ways? Which one are really working or not? What are the differences amongst them? I think that there is plenty of work to be done there. And now, with the added, let's say, difficulty of the digital life in our lives. And there are very few people working on that. Then you mentioned user-friendly justice and values, etc. But there is so little written on user experience and what customers or citizens want and expect from justice. And there I want to say, what happened with the legal professionals? What happened with the legal institutions? Are they afraid of their own clients? And I'm not going to answer. I have my own answer. But I think that there is a key thing to be answered. Psychology of legal professionals and psychology of the clients and citizens, you know. What is the psychology? How do they prefer to hire? Why are they hiring? There is so little research on that. I always have to go to the UK consumer whatever thing, and I have like 2 lovely reports for the whole world on this. But of course, they are referring to the US market or to the UK market, and you know, we are Hispanic, we are not the same, so little on that. Also, the economics of the legal sector. So business models and the impact, economic data. You know, how many are we? How many law firms are in your countries? In Spain, I have worked for several big publishing editorials. They don't know. They say, well, around 60,000, you know, and then you hear the other one and say 90,000. So the data is amazing. We can go from 16 until 90,000. This is quite a big difference. So how many law firms are there? How many solo lawyers are there? Which percentage are the really the solo lawyer? That should be official data, because we are a super relevant sector. And of course, it is us who have to change the justice. It is us. We know how many judges, but we don't know how many lawyers and what they are doing. And legal data, where is the legal data? Why is not the legal data in one fantastic repository? Why are not the legal apps or legal solutions that the state is using and the private practice is using somewhere together? And we do benchmarking. Why are we not benchmarking as other sectors are doing? We don't benchmark nationally and we don't benchmark internationally. So I think we have lots of problems, but these problems are, let's say, only to be solved by the change of the mentality in the people who are leading this sector. And of course, we can push from our universities, companies, and institutions. But I think that there is a lot to do with culture and organizational issues. Probably some people do not want to lose the power and the money that they are making at the moment. If we go from judicial conflict resolution into mediation, there are big shifts in let's say, income for a lot of people. And we know that, and that is there. And nobody wants to say it openly, but that is there. So, I mean, economy of conflict resolution is essential. We have to have transparent reports at a European level. And maybe I want to have the data of those countries where mediation is now succeeding, and I want to have the data. And I want to have the data like every day in all legal congresses and places to be discussed. These are my, let's say, reflections. And just before finishing, I have a couple of questions for you, one for each, and then we ask the audience to ask. So my question is, first for Maurice. I agree with what you said on the goal for the sustainability goal number 16. It is open justice and access to justice. It is a difficult goal. And when I started 3 years ago thinking on how to, let's say, make this goal practical in practice, I also had problems. And you have been saying, okay, great, now we have this World Justice project, but if you realize the indicators are just indicators for the public sector, but which indicators could we have for the private sector? So what can law firms to, let's say, assume the responsibility on the goal number 16, because this is not only the responsibility of public institutions, but also of private ones. So I leave you thinking there, and let me pose the second question, and this is for Francine. So Francine, you are in an open university, so online university. So as we all know, to learn about innovation and legal technology, you need to do a lot of hands-on work, you know, hackathons and touch the things, and also be with others and discuss, etc. So is it better to do it virtually? Is it better to do it physically? Or what is the best solution for, let's say, an improvement in these disciplines? And these are the two questions. So Maurice, please, if you have an answer for me, I will be super grateful.
Yes, thank you for the question. How to measure the contribution of the private sector, and especially law firms, to rule of law and access to justice. I've never really thought about that. what I can suggest is a few trends we see in measuring and monitoring. And the idea is to measure more the outcomes in people's lives, and a simple outcome measure is resolution rate. So for a law firm, yeah, when I was a lawyer myself, people once calculated my win rate, but a resolution rate in the sense of is in the eyes of the client a solution achieved is very relevant, and you can add fairness dimensions to it. And these are the kind of criteria we now use for evaluating legal systems. You can use it for evaluating court procedures, but you can also use it for law firms. Do they achieve solutions for their clients, and are the clients satisfied? Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the topic of financing justice. It was so surprising to see that no academic paper existed about financing of courts. There were a few pretty good papers by scientists working at the World Bank and places like that, and at the European Council for Judiciaries. But no academic had ever looked at how courts could be financed, how they are financed. And when we looked at financing the justice sector, one of the first things we found that people are prepared to pay a lot more for solutions because the impact on their lives is so big of many justice problems. The demand for justice is really high. And I think the same is true for the demand for research. If at the time I was at university, it was really hard for legal research to be competitive in research funding. So we had to fund most of our research from the money that comes in for teaching, and it means that many legal researchers have to teach for 3 semesters and then can have 1 semester for research. If we do more relevant research, there is tons of money available. There's, especially now, every country is looking at investment funds for society, for improving people's lives. So yeah, if you move in this direction, it's likely that you can expand your research. I wanted to add that, and sorry for making that part of an answer to a straightforward question.
Thank you. Francine.
Thanks, Maria. I think it's a really interesting question. And I suppose for someone who kind of works in this virtual world kind of all the time, even prior to the pandemic, that was kind of my world. And I think the pandemic has opened up that kind of virtual world even further. And so what I would say is that I think the potential for virtual means that, you know, here I am in sort of Manchester, England, talking to you in Spain, and I know people on this webinar across the world. And that's what virtual does. It gives us that potential to connect. And I think in terms of a legal hackathon, that ability to do that globally is incredibly empowering and really transformative. So as much as I think there's always going to be places for face-to-face, and I think we all miss that kind of interaction and of speaking to people, and you can build those relationships. I think also that virtual offers us a huge possibility that we really need to make the most of. And I think if one of the things that the pandemic has done, I think it has shown us the possibility of what virtual can do and how transformative it can be. So I would say that, you know, it's kind of a bit of both maybe, but not to see the possibility of what virtual can do.
Great. So let's thank you so very, very much. As I said, we will put this in an infographic and of course share the video. Give us a couple of weeks. And now whoever wants to ask something, please just take the microphone. If there are two questions at the same time, I will just moderate. So please, somebody wants to ask? Ibru, Carol, I'm sure that you have questions. Ivan?
Yeah, maybe a question for me. My name is Ivan Timmer. I work at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences, where we do a lot on legal tech. We have it's very much a practice-oriented research program that we have there also. So we do both research and I always say we educate not traditional legal professionals, but more hybrid legal professionals. We have a legal tech track from year 1 to year 4, where we learn, where we teach students to work with databases, with e-discovery software, with decision support software. So it's absolutely not traditional legal education. And I recently completed the research into the impact of technology at for public legal professionals working at the municipalities of around the Netherlands. And I think you will all agree that there's still a lot of work to be done, not only educating our students in initial legal education, but also educating working legal professionals, which is, of course, still the majority of legal practice. So I was just interested in your views on how should we educate the working legal professionals, not the students, but the working legal professionals? What knowledge do they need? How can we reach out to them? Because I think that's the real challenge. One of the conclusions of my research was that there's still a lot of work to be done in that field. And I was just wondering what your thoughts were on the subject.
I think that's an excellent question. I think you're absolutely right. There is this kind of need to educate legal professionals, and I know that certainly in terms of the OU is partnered on a platform of FutureLearn and is looking at devising particular kind of courses on that. But I think there's a lot to be done about kind of how we look at integrating universities and with legal professionals and how we do that. And I think certainly I can only speak from the UK point of view, but we've been quite risk averse. There's a lot of kind of monopoly of what we do, and we sort of struggle with that, I think, and about what our role is in terms of, you know, what do you do a law degree for? We have lots of questions about that, and you know, and I think there are lots of sort of issues around that. But yeah, I think in terms of, you're right, we need to be looking at legal professionals. And I think what I found really fascinating is is that when we think about kind of tech and law firms, you know, the big law firms are clearly doing lots of different things in terms of and using tech and have the resources to use tech. But actually, in terms of the way the sector's divided, if you then come down from those big law firms, it's actually what's happening in that middle and those smaller law firms, and how we do that. And part of my research has been talking to law firms, and even like sort of basic tech stuff, some of them haven't been using, and I was just absolutely flabbergasted by that. And there's a report that the Solicitors Regulation Authority have done looking at the Law Society about how little tech is done. So I think there is a role for the regulators and the societies in each of the different jurisdictions to do some work around that, but maybe as also kind of partnering with universities to share that knowledge. And I certainly know that obviously in the States, as you probably know, I think it's Suffolk University have got a number of courses that they offer, particularly directed at legal professionals in sort of bite-sized chunks to address some of these issues. But definitely that is something that I think that we need to be looking at.
Yeah, I have one question. Yeah, this one was the last question, Ibar, was such a great question. So thank you for asking that. And yeah, well, my question is, I'm also a teacher, right? So it's very difficult to sell the idea of multidisciplinary teams and multidisciplinary law schools, right? Because it was very hard for me to sell this idea of the importance to pivot, to let our law students in law schools to give the chance to them to pivot to other faculties, right? For example, if they have some interest on design, allow them to pivot to take some courses on the design, right? Or also if they are interested on psychology, like Maria Jesus said and mentioned, it was very difficult to sell the idea, hey, please allow them to pivot to the psychology faculty in order to take some courses of their interest, right? So how did you manage these difficulties?
Can I make a remark on that? Because I've had exactly this same experience. I tried to set up a course combining civil procedure with ADR. An integrated course on how you can help solve disputes as a lawyer, basically, and it was it was enormous. What kind of objections you faced in having that introduced in a law faculty, even from a rather powerful position as a professor. I think this goes very deep. In most countries, there are some kind of cartel-like rules between the universities and the bar associations. In my country, it's the bar associations, the prosecution, the courts, and the universities. They signed a covenant that people should have 3 years of legal stuff, and that it can only be 1 year of other stuff. Yeah, and in a setting of a university which is also not that innovative because people have heavily invested in their courses. Yeah, it's a bit strange that I am, as a 64 years old, continuously sounding like a revolutionary here, but break the cartel and do research on that.
Legal rebels.
Yes, you are revolutionary. You're a revolutionary, and I think that most of the people in this group somehow are revolutionary.
You have a different image of one. Yeah.
I would like to jump in as well, because I think I'm also becoming a rebel now, because I'm based in Turkey and I'm a law graduate. I worked as a lawyer, and after I even worked as a bank lawyer. So, but now I have built my own community, Legal Design Turkey, and it's a non-profit community, and we are trying to make legal design. We are trying to create awareness in Turkey. It's the first community in legal design. And the thing is, I couldn't find any support in the beginning from the legal circles. And what I did is that in Turkey, UNDP Turkey Acceleration Lab opened up a competition, UNDP Social Innovation Support Program. And there were 422 applicants, and we were one of the winners. And it was a super shocking thing because none of the judges were lawyers, and they weren't looking for a legal, maybe solution maker, let's say. But the team was solving problems in the city, and we were saying that maybe we can use legal design in the public information, public services information, and we can create trust between citizens and municipalities by creating participation channels for citizens and also like easing the subjects for them. And also we won as one of the 10 winners, and then we also gained pilot support, and we will be doing a project with UNDP Turkey. So it is super interesting because on my side, and I also worked at a university, so I have 2 years experience of working at a technology transfer office. And the thing is, like, when I approached the law schools, maybe it's because of the Turkish culture and the academia and the heavy grasp of the how can I say it, like performance issues regarding the publications and projects, funding and these kind of things. But it was the only way to do this kind of spark, let's say, in the legal field, legal innovation field in Turkey. So I was just wondering, we were discussing today about academic research, but what do you think about universities cooperating with communities and networks, maybe in the sense, to create this kind of change? I know funding is a big problem because, for example, we don't have an EIT law or EIT LegalTech or something like that, for example, or like any strong LegalTech funding from the public organizations. But I was just wondering, like, how we can motivate universities or, like maybe the funding organizations to open up space for social innovators in the legal field.
I was just going to say, in the UK, we're quite fortunate. There is an organisation called Law for Good, which is about kind of making those connections between the different partners and looking at those potential projects, which I think it's relatively recent. It's a few years old, but that has that really takes the kind of different partners and kind of brings them together. Because I think a lot of the problem is it's finding those connections and working and building those trusts to develop those connections. So we've been really fortunate that those kind of organisations exist and are starting to kind of network and make those connections between people. And we have things like there's I think it's also in the US a platform, Legal Geek, which has all the information about the different kind of law tech innovating startup companies. And I think is it Nesta that do quite a lot of the innovation funding in this space as well, in terms of putting projects together. But I think it's a real challenge that you identify, Ebru.
I would like to add to that the UK is really an amazing place for this type of public-private research initiatives, and we can really see that in our field a lot of good research has been organized and set up methodologically in the UK and also in Australia, I must say. There's many legal innovation institutes in Australia, and somehow they build a community together with the legal aid boards, with foundations, with governments in states that really created a good innovation climate. At the same time, when you walk in an Australian court, which I once did, or in a UK court, it's probably the most conservative and backwards environment you can be in. So the organizations you were mentioning, like UNDP, the international development organizations are slowly getting into it. The OECD is not a funder of research, but we learned that the OECD is so leading as a think tank in member countries, but also in non-member countries, that if they steer research in a certain direction, and they do, then that can really convince national research agencies, etc. There's good experiments in research in academia of interdisciplinary research. If you can really engage economists or psychologists to make this to make justice a topic, then you will get then you will fly. So yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about in this inspiring way about building communities and working together. Ebru, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to say that what you are saying, Maurice, I agree. I don't know why somehow the Anglo-Saxon countries are more able to put together the private and the public sector. It seems that the public sector has no problem to find ways to work together with the private one. Whilst I think that at least in the Latin countries, there is always this panic to, if I work with this private company, then there might be some kind of, let's say, illegitimate relations, etc. So there is like, I guess that, let's say, the very rigid public procurement system avoids the public sector to do initiatives. And there is probably there where we should do some research and see why the Anglo-Saxon countries can, have this kind of, let's say, clusters or hubs, or I don't know what they are, and I don't know how they manage to always have a place where they can meet. Here is like, they like you, they admire your work, eventually they might hire you for a conference, but that's the most you can reach. And I talk from experience, so I think that there is something there. Yeah. More questions, or we have like 4 more minutes if we want to be rigid with the time. So anyone wants to ask the last question?
Maria, there are some questions on the chat screen. Are there any projects to work on? Is it possible to attend some of them as observer? And Zelal would like to also know it as well. So student participation in the research, I think, if we summarize the questions.
Okay. Okay, so to the students, I don't know if you at the Open University or at Hill, do you have any projects where these students could enroll? If anybody else in the audience have got some projects where they are needing students.
We have vacancies and yeah, often also for more junior researchers, but mostly mid-year people or have a bit more experience at university. And usually we're looking for a combination of justice motivation, willingness to apply multiple methods, yeah, and some quantitative skill. If you don't like numbers, then it's hard. But if you're open to learning a bit, then that's how we have many lawyers who turned into good social scientists. Yeah.
Interesting. So, okay, Nelia, what is your question, please?
Hi, I don't have a project that I'm working on that I need students, but I wanted to share a little project that I did work on and some of my work. So I'm a former lawyer. I taught. I was a law professor for a little bit. I had a startup, and I've sort of transitioned into the field of strategic foresight. So what I do is I look at, I'm looking at the legal industry and looking at sort of very long-term time horizons. So like 10, 20, 50 years, and analyzing trends and drivers, and looking for potential futures, some people call this area like strategic foresight or future studies. And so this is a project that I worked on pre-pandemic, looking at future of law and how, and specifically looking at access to justice here in Canada. So I just wanted to share that. This is sort of a new area of study, and I just wanted to put that out there if anyone has an interest in this kind of work to contact me.
Great, Noelia. I have an interest because I think that there is so little about prospects, and the only prospects we have are those that some gurus have in their mind, and it's fantastic, but I always miss data behind it. So I think it's very nice to invent the future, but very difficult to draft it, you know, based on data and on, let's say, big data and all that. So I think it's amazing. And I think that what I suggest is that we have one of our upcoming events. We can maybe talk about future, you know, or can we research the future? I think that's a really, really interesting topic. So thanks for sharing. I think that Maurice, they are asking for your contact is there already. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so unless somebody wants to add something, I would just ask our two fantastic speakers to give us like a last sentence that can serve us for Twitter as, let's say, a title for our news that we will publish on this webinar. So just a 200-word sentence on as a summary of what we learned or what you want to share with us.
Oh, that's
that's polite.
Can I think and send you that as opposed to off the top of my head? For Twitter. That's a big task, Maria.
I mean, I give you 400 words if you want, but let's do it now, and let's use your creativity. You know that your sentence will be fantastic anyway. Let's not be scared. Let's just be spontaneous.
I'll think about a sentence, but I wanted to thank you, Maria, for the inspirational way you led this this talk. You have interviewers, and your commitment is helping so much to bring this forward. And we have to work together as researchers in this field. I think April really. Made us aware of that, how much is needed, how much that is needed. Yeah.
So thank you. That's a fantastic sentence. And Francine, I'm sure that you can make such a sentence as well. Prove yourself.
Yeah, I will send you some words of wisdom, Maria.
Thank you so very much to both of you. Thank you to all the people who attended the webinar today. We will share the conclusions soon, and we await for you in September. We are back. We will be informing you of the upcoming webinars, and have a very nice rest of the week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.